ask you to give us a clap so we can sync all the cameras?
3 claps. I usually do 3 claps.
Just one.
Just one.
Oh,
okay.
Great. Welcome to A New Table, where local conversations are at the heart of global change. I'm here, well, I am, and Sam. Sam and I are both here today in Dorset with Emma. Emma Ellice Flint, who is a accredited nutritionist, also a published author.
Absolutely.
And who specializes in nutrition, especially around perimenopause and menopause. Thank you so much for being on our podcast.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love what you're doing.
So
I am delighted when you asked me. Yeah.
Yes. And also we are, well, we're obviously probably going to publish this a little bit later, but we're filming this the day after we came out with our trailer. So exciting. But okay, so very excited for you to join us. Obviously, we like to start with giving a little bit of background of our guests. So, from what I gather, obviously you have a very interesting professional journey spanning decades. You started in hospitality and then you went over to be a professional chef, and then you moved over towards the science side of nutrition. So do you want to walk us through a little bit about how you became Emma?
Yeah, no,
Nutrition.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. But you're right, I was chefing. I was working as a chef in Sydney, Australia, where I've spent most of my adult life.
But you were originally born in
England. I'm originally born in England, and we're now sitting in England for this podcast because I moved back about 4 years ago. So I was in Sydney, Australia. Now the produce, I don't know if you've ever been there, the produce is just stunning there because the climate's so wonderful. And they've just
been yet, yeah.
Absolutely, fruit and vegetables just coming out of everywhere, beautiful fruit and vegetables. So I was very inspired by that anyway. And I was chefing, so sure, my food was kind of like just high-end posh food, not very nutritionally focused. But me personally, I was feeling like I wanted to go more in that direction. Okay. And I was not feeling as well as I could be. I had kind of like irritable bowel syndrome. I fluctuated between loose bowel movements or like a little bit of constipation. And I just got through the day. I didn't absolutely jump through the day and have lots of vitality. And so I knew I couldn't be a chef for the whole of my life because it's sweaty and it's hot. And I can yell at people, which I like doing. But, there's just so much you can take. So I thought, right, I'm going to stop this and I'm going to go and study my degree in nutrition. And I did. And boy, within the first semester, bam, eyes opened. Oh, is that right? Oh, yes, that makes so much sense. It's like a real light bulb moment. And I started playing with the food on myself, what I was learning in my nutrition degree.
Oh, you were your own guinea pig.
I was my own guinea pig. And my symptoms changed, and I didn't really think about it. I just stopped having loose bowel movements, and I had regular bowel movements. By the way, I talk about bowel movements in my clinic work
all the time. Yeah,
all the time.
I know. This is just the intro. We're not even 2 minutes in, and we're already talking about poop. Love it.
Absolutely. So,
but honestly, I think that people who are going to be watching this are the target audience.
Yeah. Poop is really important. It actually tells you masses about yourself. Okay.
So it's like instead of like card reading or your tea.
Completely. Or your iridology, looking at your iris, which actually has some foundation in science. It's a bit sketchy, but it does.
Yeah,
okay. Poop, definitely. Yeah. All right. So look, I just got better. And I didn't think about it until I reflected about 3 months after I started changing what I was eating.
Okay.
And I felt blimey, I'm jumping out of bed in the morning. I get through the day. I have vitality. I had started up a bit of exercise, but that was after I started feeling better. My bowel movements were every day. I was feeling good. I had a flat tummy instead of a bloated one every night, you know?
Yeah.
And I felt good.
Did you journal your food, or were you just like naturally in tune with like when things weren't going well? When
I
things
was
were
just
going
naturally
well?
in tune. I
Okay.
didn't journal it. I think I should have really kept a detailed diary of the changes, but I didn't. But it was what I was learning in my degree anyway. And then I started practicing on some family members, and then by this time I was getting well into my degree. Then I had to start clinic work within my degree. Observational only at first, but that was so fascinating, and I wanted to, always be making suggestions with clients about what they should be doing, and it just snowballed from there. It's
I think it's super cool to so I have it written down here actually, and I find it really important to sort of really state the educational background, because I think there can be a little bit of a misconception that things that are or professionals that have a more holistic approach might not be as accredited or as educated, but you have a bachelor in nutritional science,
absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
And then a advanced diploma in nutritional medicine.
Yeah.
You also did an introduction to nutritional psychiatry.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so interesting as well, because I am extremely interested in how food can change your mood, or how your mood can be changed by food. Really interested in that. I see that a lot in my clinic work, and so I wanted to delve into it more, and I might go further, but we'll see. Yeah. Very, very interested in that. And so that was great. That was fantastic. And of course I did, because of my IBS type background, I wanted to learn what the latest research was showing. So I actually did, in fact, what's called the low FODMAP certificate.
Yeah.
And FODMAP is just an acronym for types of fermentable foods: fructose, oligosaccharides, disaccharides, things like that, monosaccharides. And it's just the foods that ferment in your gut and can cause like IBS type symptoms. So I learned all about that. So that was a real good postgraduate.
So you totally geeked out on the science side of food. Yeah. So you went from like food for pleasure to food for, function, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And now, a practicing nutritionist, you do one-on-one consultations. You do workshops.
I do
as well. I know that you work with different brands for recipes, advice, insights. You work with the Balance app too.
I do the Balance Menopause and Perimenopause app. Amazing free app. Fantastic content, including mine, of course, but amazing foundational content, all evidence-based, factual. A lot of it's written by the doctors that work with Balance. It's fantastic, actually. An amazing app.
That's super cool. We'll definitely pop it up on the screen for people to find out about it.
Yeah.
And then also a published author. You have several books, right? I know the Happy Hormone cookbook.
So the Happy Hormone cookbook is my most sold book.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's out of print at the moment, but we're going to try and convert it into an ebook, and that would be just so much more accessible for more people, which I want. And that's fantastic. Yeah, that started a bit my journey. I was doing a workshop about foods for female hormones.
Right.
Okay, lovely, fantastic topic. I was very passionate about it because I had seen in my clinic work, and this was still whilst I was living in Sydney, I'd seen that food does help a female feel more balanced, helps her hormones, especially that PMS time, that time running up to her period starting.
Yeah.
And so I was running workshops, and then there was a publisher that just happened to personally come to the workshop and said, could you write me a cookbook on this? And I went, yep, amazing. I can do this. I can do that for you. So yeah, it was great. Yeah.
So now that's really your niche, I would say, right?
Yeah. So I morphed into that, and then I morphed more specifically into that perimenopause menopause stage, because there was so little known about it. I didn't know much about it. I was seeing some big improvements in my clients that were in that kind of time, and I can't really say age category, because So usually a woman goes into perimenopause in her 40s, maybe mid-40s. Usually a woman goes into menopause in kind of early 50s.
Okay.
But the point is, of course, there's outliers.
That can happen much earlier.
And
much later.
perimenopause can start happening in a woman's 30s.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And in fact, unfortunately, what's called premature ovarian insufficiency, POS, can happen where a woman goes into menopause also in her before her 40s even.
Okay.
So it's actually becoming more common. Yeah. So because I think there's a lot of hormone disruption going on, and we can go into that, down the track. So I was becoming more and more interested, in fact, in the perimenopause, especially because it's a bumpy ride. It's a real bumpy ride for a woman. It's your hormones are still there, but they're going up and they're down, and then they're gradually declining, and then you're just all over the place. Can you imagine? You might have the most beautiful life, the most balanced life, very zen even, but along comes this natural transition for you, say, I'm not yet, but it comes along.
Knock on wood, not yet. Yeah.
And this is a wooden table, so that's good.
Yeah.
I think, and then it's bumpy, really bumpy. And so
what are the symptoms and signs that make you bumpy? Do we want to know?
No. Well, on the Balance app, there's a fantastic list of all the literally evidence-based symptoms and symptoms that doctors have seen in their clinic work. And that's a really comprehensive list. I think there's something like 30 or 40 potential symptoms. So I won't go into all of them now.
Sure, yeah.
But what are the symptoms? Okay, disturbed sleep is a classic. Okay. For no particular reason, disturbed sleep. And then also your periods very slightly maybe changing. Maybe they've been regular. Maybe they've been spot on every 28 days. And then they might get a little bit shorter. Maybe they're every 26 days, but still regular. Or perhaps they lengthen out a little bit. Or perhaps your periods become heavier, quite a lot heavier. A lot of heavy bleeding where they weren't normally. Or the opposite, they become really lighter, or even you skip a month here and there occasionally. See what I mean? So that's just this bumpiness, it changes. Then your skin can become a bit more irritated. Some people who may have had acne in their teenage years get a little bit of like acne rosacea in that perimenopause. Their skin, hair and nails aren't quite so good and healthy. Their digestive system absolutely starts to play up. Okay. Not always, but quite frequently. So especially if they may have had a history of IBS or something like that. So maybe they get more bloating or changes in their bowel movements. Back to bowel movements, you see. Definitely going to come back to bowel movements. And that affects them, their digestion, their overall vitality, also affects their gut microbes, so their gut microbiota. And we can go into that and why that's so important. But the thing is, that's not the least of it. They might get quite itchy skin. Some people even get a feeling like they've got insects crawling underneath their skin.
Wow. Okay.
Other people get tinnitus.
And this is perimenopause?
Perimenopause, and menopause. So really it's kind of a blend. Menopause is simply, officially, when a woman has not had a period for 12 months.
Okay, and I see. Oh, okay.
So really, perimenopause and menopause are kind of, they're kind of this whole journey. It's just a different terminology simply because it's once the periods have stopped for 12 months, then you're in menopause. But it's all the same kind of time. Okay, so this crawling, itchy skin, dry skin, like really unpleasant. Some women get dry mouths, like almost like dry throat or lungs, dry vaginas, that sort of thing. Really, really irritating. And dry eyes, of course.
Yeah.
As I say, hearing changes or hearing loss or tinnitus.
What's that thing that happens when you start to have like placebo? I feel like I'm thinking about, do I have things crawling my skin right now? Are my lips dry? I think my eyes are itchy.
So psychosomatic.
Psychosomatic. That's it. So, okay, wait. It sounds like a lot of crazy stuff happens to you. Yeah. It does seem like there's not like one straight answer. I assume that there's no like one test that will be able to.
Oh no, not at all.
Great, you're in perimenopause.
No.
Okay.
No. You can test your bloods once you're in menopause, but really it's not about the blood test, for example. It's, for instance, 12 months after you've had no periods, you're in menopause. Okay. And that big symptom list,
Yeah.
you could tick it, and once there's enough ticks,
Okay. And menopause, I mean, obviously like the whole caricature, especially in like films and TV of the hot flashes and the I mean, really, it's the hot flashes.
Yeah.
What's that like, menopause? It's not because. So it's interesting that you say it's when it's been 12 months that a woman hasn't had her period. It doesn't necessarily mean she has no more hormones to balance.
No,
right?
absolutely, yeah. So there is a little bit of, we do still make testosterone, estrogen and progesterone, not really progesterone, testosterone, estrogen, once we've gone into menopause, a little bit of progesterone. Anyway, that's made a little bit from your ovaries, but also from your adrenal glands.
Okay.
So we do make a little bit, so it's there.
Where are those?
Adrenals.
Dumb question.
Okay, no, they're sitting on top of your kidneys, just here.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
See, I ask all the dumb questions because
Good.
I will never be embarrassed because I know. Well, first of all, I'd like to know.
Yeah.
I could Google it, but you're right here, and then I know that there's probably like at least one other person listening to this who's like, oh, thank God she asked that.
Yeah. Okay, and that's the thing, because a lot gets talked about these days about adrenal fatigue. We're all stressed out more.
Oh my gosh, yes,
okay.
I heard that term.
Okay, so we know about adrenal fatigue, and we know about cortisol imbalance, and that's the thing, and this whole stress discussion, okay, and that goes on even much more in perimenopause and early menopause anyway, because of this flux, this bumpy ride a woman's in, and so we want to really nourish and nurture those adrenals, because they're also going to provide us with a little bit of our female hormones. Right. And also we want to keep our body in balance anyway, so we can cope with this and we can be
a
fine.
bit more comfortable and all that.
Yeah, and I haven't even mentioned the most important, I think, symptom. I mean, yes, hot flashes is the classic, but mood changes.
Mood changes, okay. What's the difference with mood changes and like personality changes? I mean, totally unrelated, I guess. Okay, so I don't know really about personality changes. That sounds like a psychiatrist diagnosis sort of thing. The mood, our mood is just how happy you feel, or how over emotional are you, or how tearful are you, where it might not be so appropriate for you to be so tearful or upset. Or do you kind of feel flat in the day? I.e., we all go through in our day, moments even of happiness and joy. Yeah. But then we come down a bit, and even we go through a bit of, oh gosh, this day is a real struggle. But we might do this, but sometimes in perimenopause and early menopause, a woman almost feels like flatlining. Oh, so it's not just the huge ups and downs that we almost see in TVs and films.
Oh yeah, no.
It can just be you're just a little bit
lack of joy,
neutral. Lack of joy.
Lack of joy. I mean, thinking about you as a person, that lack of joy, you don't get excited about something. Yeah. That's awful.
You're just meh all the time. Yeah.
But also a lot of women could get sort of anxiety, and those feelings of anxiety where they feel like it's extreme to the external stimuli. Why am I getting so anxious about this? And that's because of this hormonal change.
Interesting.
And yes, depression, definitely depression, and it can be really severe depression if it's not treated. But we're lucky these days because we've got the natural body identical HRT, which wasn't around even 10 years ago.
What does that stand for?
Okay, HRT is hormone replacement therapy.
Ah, okay.
It's great. It's fantastic.
Oh, HRT.
Yeah, HRT. Yeah. And it's good. It's very good. It's made from wild yams, which are like wild potatoes sort of thing. And it's a very natural product. It's great. It has to be prescribed by a doctor.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Okay, so you can't pick this up at like health shop or something like that.
I understand. I literally was seeing a girlfriend of mine who's living in France over the summer. She rocked up to a chemist and was able to get it. And I thought, oh gosh, that's interesting. Yeah. And so I think different countries.
I was going to say.
Vaginal estrogen is now available, for instance, over the counter in the UK, which is really good. Okay. That's very good. Yeah. But yes, the HRT, which is a gel or a patch, which is estrogen gel or patch, that has to be prescribed by a doctor.
And so that's good for women in perimenopause, menopause to kind of help balance things out.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you were saying how, like, the connection with depression, for example, because we had a chat with Lola from the Health Box in Ledgely.
Yeah.
And she was talking about, of course, how holistically your gut is so connected to different things.
Yeah.
So I've seen the relevance then of nutrition
Yeah.
as being something really important to, I guess, sustain yourself better through the stages of your cycle, but I assume the stages of
Completely.
your life as a woman.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if a person really eats that modern Western style diet, full of ultra processed food, then they're going to feel pretty rubbish. Or they're just going to not feel like literally they've got that joy in their day or that vitality in their day. They're just going to cope, and they'll most likely be having headaches, and they may even put on weight, and their skin will be perhaps a bit dull, and they'll just think, oh, what's going on? But then they won't have energy to even sort of sort it out.
That's so true though. When you're you're too tired to even put effort into figuring out an alternative. Yeah, that's so true.
So add to that, which a lot of people might feel, whoever they are, if they're eating that style of diet, and then add to that this hormonal flux.
Hormonal thing that could be like an added layer of, so we're really fighting.
Really unfair of nature to do that, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, I think it's something like 100, 200 years, or maybe 200 years ago, women usually died around about menopause, or before they even got into the menopause. So, yeah.
All right. So this is like semi-unexplored territory, basically.
Yeah, most definitely.
That's really exciting, though, when you get to sort of like be the first, of the first kind of generations to like break down the science and the understanding.
Yeah. So, and it counts also if someone's, say, taking HRT, but they're still, not looking after themselves, and they're eating that Western style diet with ultra processed food, and they are not particularly exercising, then they're still not going to feel that fantastic. The HRT may have helped them, their symptoms.
But it's almost like it's kind of like, not to use the poop analogy, but it's like, spraying perfume on a pile of, it's still, there's still, the problem is still there.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, why not encourage someone just to have a bit more vitality to their life, just feel a bit better, and it doesn't take massive changes. And this is actually not just to do with women. This is the area that my clinic work is women in perimenopause and menopause, but actually this applies to all human beings. This is about nourishing you, that human being, and your gut microbiome. Because why do I pull in the gut microbiome as well? Because the gut microbiome produces anti-inflammatory benefits. It actually helps create vitamins in our body. So anti-inflammatory vitamins. It also helps in production of those fabulous neurotransmitters that make us feel happier, like serotonin. About 90% of serotonin is part manufactured in the gut, in conjunction with our gut microbiome.
Oh, that's so interesting. Wow.
Like, we want to really nurture that. And it turns out that all that kind of healthy, good food, like the Mediterranean style diet, is amazing for us human beings, but it's amazing for our gut microbe. Okay. So it's a win-win, absolutely.
So it's about food that obviously fuels, but also food that heals.
Yeah.
And
it goes beyond healing even.
Okay.
So you actually really start really living your life. That jumping out of bed feeling. Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear, like, breaking down what you feel like an ideal diet is, just in general for people, obviously, but also for women. But before, I just want to ask you, do you sometimes also consult, or are there different considerations you can have for women that through different like hormonal stages, like for example, women trying to get pregnant, or through pregnancy, or even like, I don't know, even teenage years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's actually all very similar, in fact, because we're just managing that gut microbiome balance, and we're managing the hormones a bit better, and it's actually a very similar way of eating. And to start with, if someone's eating a Western style diet, it's just nudging them away from that a little bit. So it's going a little bit away from that kind of convenience food, and just perhaps bringing in a few other more nourishing ingredients into their day. Now, we were speaking, weren't we, before about what do we have for breakfast? And, and I was talking to you about why the first meal of the day, which may not be at the classic breakfast time, doesn't matter what time it is, but the first meal of the day, you really want to actually think about, now, can I make that as nourishing as possible? Even if the rest of the day falls away and you get super busy and you can't really kind of control that too well, that first meal, you think, now, can I nourish my gut microbiome and me through this? And you started your day off well. It's great.
I don't know that I started my day off really great because it's just a lot of coffee on an empty stomach and toast, but it's sourdough. So
the sourdough is really good. It's really good.
It's the better of breads.
Yeah, it is. Sure. Absolutely right. Yeah. No, sourdough is good. Yeah, it's great.
I know that this podcast obviously is very relevant for women, but I do think it's relevant for men listening to this too, just to have an understanding, especially men who might have women partners or daughters or, whatever. What would you say, just before we deep dive into the diet stuff, but what would you say is the biggest difference, or just things to consider that's the biggest difference between men and women when it comes to hormone cycles and like the adaptive diets?
Okay. Well, so guys don't particularly have massive hormonal changes in a month.
Right.
Okay. It's very subtly maybe, but not massive. But of course men go through andropause, which is not as dramatic as women's menopause, but they go through andropause when their own androgens, which are their own male sex hormones, start to decline. And this is very individual.
Which is later in life.
Yeah, which is typically later in life. Okay. But it's actually around that similar time period.
So a bit of a male menopause.
Yeah, no, that's right. Cool. And it's called andropause.
Okay.
Yeah.
Andropause. Cool.
So that's like 40s, 50s, and that's easily tested for in a blood test. You just test your testosterone levels.
I see.
Okay, so that's easy for them. It's not so easy for women. Never
I'm
easy
surprised.
for women. Yeah, right. And,
I'm joking.
And there are things they can do, like literally, like there's women's HRT. Yeah. There's TRT for guys, which is great. It's natural. It's fantastic. Testosterone replacement therapy. That's good. But the food I'm talking about here today applies to them just as much to women. Yeah. Absolutely.
And everyone.
And everybody in between. It's very much to all human beings.
Perfect.
And this is this anti-inflammatory diet. And it's foundational and fundamental to a person really living the best they can. It just is. And it's not hard. It's not hard at all. Yeah.
Well, obviously I try my best to get a little bit familiar with the different terms. Obviously, you're the expert. I was almost seeing like, okay, well, there's anti-inflammatory diets. There's related to like, low histamine diets. Yeah. But then there's like diets that are for your gut health, but really it's all kind of...
Yeah, it kind of all
goes together.
It's all together, really. Because, for instance, I focus on what's called the Mediterranean diet, but you don't have to live around the Mediterranean at all.
So what's a Mediterranean diet?
Yeah, so I'll explain to you, and this is for all humans. This is literally... so a Mediterranean diet is very plant-focused. It doesn't have to be fully plant-based, but it's very plant-focused. So what we've got there typically is we've got people eating a lot of vegetables and fruit and nuts and seeds and whole grains and legumes, pulses, beans, and also lots of herbs and spices, plenty of extra virgin olive oil, and that's it. There is definitely dairy in a Mediterranean diet, and there is lots of seafood around the Mediterranean. But
what about red meat, lamb?
And there is a little bit of goat, a little bit of lamb, some rabbit. Absolutely. Typically, I mean, these days I imagine there's a bit of chicken in there and that sort of thing, but there's not meat's not frequently eaten, not daily, definitely not daily.
Okay. So when you're saying it's very plant focused, which includes some grains. So what would you not find in a Mediterranean diet? Like, is there a lot of wheat?
No, there would be a good mix of grains. Okay. Traditionally, it'd be what would be typically grown around that country in the Mediterranean.
So grains would be, for example...
Okay, so there's buckwheat, there's quinoa, there's millet, there's amaranth. Okay. And And yes, there's wheat, barley, rye, oats, sure, but it's kind of like be blended a bit.
Okay.
But just whatever's around that area. And all those grains generally can grow in most countries, actually. And in fact, those are all grown in the UK. It's just not very common to see all of those grains unless you go seeking them out. And yeah, so great, definitely whole grains, definitely part of the Mediterranean diet.
And what would you typically not find in a Mediterranean diet?
So ultra processed food, ready prepared foods, that sort of thing.
So like that's what, explain it.
Okay, yeah. So foods that have had a lot of their nutrients stripped from them, and they're kind of being almost remashed together and created it kind of like into a meal that might be great. Okay, so let's take wheat, a grain, for example. A whole grain wheat is great. It's quite nutritious. You don't want to eat it all the time. Let's digress for a second. A typical Western style diet might be somebody who has a piece of toast for breakfast, or they might have some cereal, some wheat-based cereal for breakfast. And then they might have, say, a biscuit mid-morning or something like that. That's wheat-based. And then they might have a sandwich for lunch. That's very typical in England.
So we're packing on the
wheat, same grain.
Yeah.
But that doesn't stop. They might still have another biscuit in the afternoon or something like that. They might have maybe a pie or a roll or a pasta dish even in the evening. That's wheat. And not only that, most likely it's white flour. Okay. And that's not diversity. There's no diversity in that. So there's nothing wrong with whole wheat. It's nutritious, but you don't have it all the time. You mix it up with other grains. So let's talk about coming back to the ultra processed food. Let's take pizza as an example.
Yeah.
So that's usually white flour, which has been stripped of all its nutritional benefit. So much so that now legislation in a lot of countries means that they have to literally put vitamins back into the white flour.
Oh, that's why you see enriched white flour, right? Oh, God.
Because they've stripped the goodness out of it.
So that's actually not a good thing when you see an enriched food. It means why was this food already not nutritional enough that you had to add stuff
literally,
in?
it's law. They have to add it back in.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it's white flour. Pizza is usually made from, and it's usually a very quick, fast rising. Rarely, I mean, it wouldn't be sourdough unless you go to a specialist place. Okay, so we've got this bread base which has no nutritional value or barely. Okay,
it's dead flour.
Yeah. Because it's lost its fibre, and yes, there are vitamins added in. And then you've got on top, you've got processed cheese. So not cheese that usually is dead itself in a sense. It doesn't have the beneficial microbes in it.
Pasteurized, all that.
Yeah. And then we might have a little thin bit of tomato sauce, but that's been through a strainer. Usually it's lost any of its fibre. Might have some vitamin C left in it, I doubt it. And then, that's a typical pizza. Okay, so what I mean is nutritionally, that is an ultra-processed food where they've taken a natural food like whole grain wheat or a tomato or a cheese that has been made in the kind of like a natural method where they've still got beneficial microorganisms in it. Taken all of those good foods and actually just stripped out the benefit and then made a food that tastes great. Of course, lots of salt in it, usually actually salt and sugar in the bread dough, but it's just got, apart from the macros in it, like literally the carbohydrates, the protein, the fat in it, it's just lost it. It's lost it.
And when it comes to, I'd love to dive into what is considered inflammatory foods, but I was reading somewhere that it's not necessarily what we eat, but it's just when your body receives just this huge hit of it is when your body goes into revolts, basically, becomes inflamed. It's not having a little bit of bread once in a while, but it's just if you're piling it on all the time.
Like I just described, that typical
day.
Yeah. That also can be the case, definitely. Your body has to work hard. The pancreas, which produces insulin, has to work really hard because those white flour products, they have what's called a high glycemic index. And so usually they act almost a bit like sugar in the body. They get digested really fast. And that means there's a lot of glucose or sugar going into the bloodstream quite fast. So insulin has to come into the blood. It's hard work for the pancreas. That's partly what I think that's meaning. And the other thing with ultra-processed foods, like a pizza, it's not, a wedge of pizza. Who eats just a wedge of a pizza? A lot of people eat a whole pizza because it actually doesn't fill you up that fast because it's not full of fiber and loads of protein and things like that. So,
it doesn't keep you full longer.
No, but it also doesn't even fill you up at that time of eating because we just generally eat more of it. Apparently, in a cereal packet, you're given an average serving in the ingredients list sort of index thing. And most people, they found when they've studied it in the UK anyway, most people eat usually 2 servings of cereal, just typically, because one serving isn't actually not filling enough.
True. Yeah. Like you see the recommended servings, and if you see what it actually is, it's actually a lot less than what we
people usually have.
Or
usually,
need.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, because it's just kind of nutritionally not going to make you feel satisfied that fast. Yeah.
So in terms of, so talking about the anti-inflammatory diets, it's low histamine.
No, don't
park
histamine away. That is actually a very niche diet for a few people that might have an intolerance to histamine.
I see.
And that, park it out of the way. It's just, I see
too
that,
niche then.
Too niche. I see that
but
a bit in clinic.
But you do have a book about it.
I do have an ebook about it because I occasionally have a client that virtually walks into my clinic room and she has some symptoms that are a bit like perimenopause, but she may, anyway, I think to myself, okay, what's going on here? But then she might give me her history.
Gotcha.
And I think, actually, this could be maybe histamine. And she's already tried to address her perimenopause symptoms, perhaps through HRT, for instance. And anyway, let's park that. Don't
parking it.
Yeah.
But
the anti-inflammatory,
which is much more broad, maybe a lot more relevant then to everyone. So, what would you say? So we covered is it gluten or is it just like less beneficial flour? But are there other inflammatory foods that we find?
So that Mediterranean style diet is anti-inflammatory,
right?
Because it's full of fiber, lots of different fibers as well, and it's full of what's called. I'll talk about the good anti-inflammatory diet first.
Okay.
It's full of what's called polyphenols. And I'll explain that in a second. Okay. They're anti-inflammatory. And it's full of vitamins and minerals. And and protein and all that sort of thing. So it's got loads of benefit going for it. And it has an anti-inflammatory benefit. Now, going back, for instance, to polyphenols, sometimes called plant phenols, sometimes called I call them polyphenols. I mean, these are naturally occurring plant compounds.
Okay.
Naturally occurring across the entire plant world. So they're in your morning coffee as well. They're in,
oh, really?
Yeah. Oh. They're in cocoa, for instance. So I'm not just talking about vegetables and fruit. I'm talking about vegetables, fruit, nuts, seeds, legumes, pulses, beans, whole grains, herbs, spices, coffee, cocoa, which is in chocolate. So they're all plant foods, have polyphenols in. They're naturally occurring plant compounds, and they have an anti-inflammatory benefit in your body. Just superb, absolutely superb. And mostly because our gut microbiome or gut microbiota that reside in our gut, they eat, so to speak.
So that's all the good little
buddies in there,
that we host in our
which
systems.
are not part of us human beings. They're on the outside in our gastrointestinal tract, and they eat fiber in our food. Or if we have fiber in our food, they eat that. Any types, gorgeous. They also eat is not a technical term.
They break things down.
Yeah, and let's say they take in these polyphenols, these naturally occurring plant compounds, and they effectively give out anti-inflammatory compounds in return, which we humans use. From. I mean, it's just, now we know. We didn't even know this like several decades ago. I don't think we did. Science didn't. Now we know It's fantastic. It's phenomenal, actually. It's so good. And so they're effectively almost, this is not technical either, they're pooping out these beneficial anti-inflammatory compounds that we humans then use around
inside
our body.
us.
Inside our gut,
yeah.
but they actually cross our gut barrier, our gut lining, our gut wall, and it goes into our bloodstream and into our lymph and that sort of thing, and has this brilliant anti-inflammatory effect around the body. And don't forget that anti-inflammatory also is amazing for our brains and our mood. It's actually been found in research that a ultra-processed Western modern diet, which is inflammatory, can actually exacerbate or increase the likelihood of someone getting mild depression or depression.
Okay.
So in fact, that was shown actually in an Australian university, several studies, that when people swapped over to more of an anti-inflammatory diet, like a Mediterranean focus sort of diet, they actually, their depression, most people's depression was
that's great.
either relieved, reduced, or actually went away. Fantastic. So now,
that's some of the benefits.
Yeah. So now we go to an inflammatory diet, and that's our modern Western style diet, where foods have been stripped of the benefits. Most of the polyphenols have gone away. Basically almost all the fiber has gone. So no anti-inflammatory kind of compounds or nutrients to help feed.
So we're not
gut.
feeding our little guys
none at all
good things too, so they're not happy and they're not doing well. They can't help us in return.
Yeah. And then we have quite inflammatory ingredients like sugar and even excess vegetable oils and that sort of thing, and saturated fat. Little bit's fine, it's absolutely fine, but a lot of it can be quite inflammatory in the body. So we also have quite inflammatory ingredients in those foods as well.
And so what are some of the I want to say the effects of having a heavily inflammatory diet? What are the things that people at home might kind of maybe feel or experience themselves?
Okay. Maybe low mood, or that flatlining, not so much joy, or even depression, mild depression, that sort of thing. Probably if it's a woman, that her menstrual cycle might not be that good, especially that that pre-period time, the PMS-y thing could be worse.
Okay.
They could get worse period pain. For men and women, or guys, or anyone in between.
Yes. Men do suffer when our PMSs are worse.
No. So what I mean is that everybody can feel perhaps a little bit more tired, more headachy. Perhaps their sleep's a little bit disturbed. Maybe they've got some skin rashes even, or kind of some skin conditions going on, that sort of thing.
Okay.
They're just not living, really living.
And you
life.
said something about bloating before as well. Is that linked
that's
to
quite
that,
common. Or their bowel movements may be a bit loose, or a bit constipated, or very constipated and loose. Gastroenterologists will define constipation as someone who poops less than every 3 days. So if you only poop once every 3 days, they don't define that as constipation. But if you only poop once every 4 or 5 days, they define that as constipation.
Okay.
So, there's a big range. We humans, there's a big range of what's normal, and that's fine. Some people regularly poop a couple of times a day at least, maybe 3 times a day, and that's okay as well, as long as it's not sloppy and loose and diarrhea-y, okay? And then someone might not poop for maybe a day or 2, and that's still okay as well. So it varies, So that would also change if someone's eating this kind of inflammatory diet. And yes, most likely a bit of gut bloating.
Interesting. Okay, so what are usually when somebody comes and and we can focus more on women too, but when you have, would you call them clients come to you? Yeah, I call them clients. Yeah, clients come to you.
Rather than patients, because that implies there's something wrong with them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when someone, a human, likely a woman, comes to you, and I assume you have to go through this investigation, what is the usual approach? I know we hear a lot about the process of elimination. Is that
not necessarily, because it depends what that person presents with. I do a really deep dive in that first consult into what's going on for them, so their immediate symptoms, and everything that I've talked about. You know, I ask them about their period, if they're still menstruating. I might ask them definitely about how their gut is functioning in detail, and I might ask them, you know, how's their skin, how's their sleep, do they get headaches, you know, do they think they have enough energy to get through the day, you know, lots of questions. But I also ask them about their body's history, and I also ask them about their family history, and I also ask them about the environment where they live or their work or things like that. Because, you know, if they live in a really mouldy house, that might be affecting them. I don't know. Are they in the city? Are they in the countryside? You know, there's just so many. We really go into it. And then I ask them about their ability to change what they're eating. You know, is it easy?
Right.
How would we do that? What can they get in? What foods can they get in? And where do they shop? Online, in a shop? What's available to them? Yeah.
Because, I mean, when we talk about, and we talk a lot about sustainable approaches, and we think, you know, sustainability as in like super healthy, but it also has to be realistic, right? So I assume that you come up with a plan that can be
super realistic.
Yeah, because not everybody either has access or the time, the resources.
Yeah.
But you can make some changes already that will have some big impact.
Absolutely right. Completely. So often I'm bringing some foods in to what
rather
they're
than
eating,
eliminate.
rather than eliminating.
Okay.
I rarely do what's called an elimination diet. I actually almost never do that as such.
Oh, that's really refreshing to hear.
But we might do swaps, or we might bring in some things. So one of a classic thing might
what's a
be,
classic
template?
template?
Is maybe they're not eating any nuts and seeds. Remember, most of my clients all my clients currently are women. So they might not be eating nuts and seeds because they think that it's going to make them fat.
Oh,
okay.
Because nuts are fatty.
Because they're dense in calories. Okay, that has been challenged recently in science.
Yeah.
Okay, because of the way we might absorb the calories from that particular nut, but let's not go into that.
We like fats here. We
do like, and so the fat, the oil in nuts and seeds is anti-inflammatory. It's brilliant.
Okay,
it's absolutely fantastic. So, but they might not be eating them because they thought that it was fattening. So, and we talk around that anyway, because there's an anti-inflammatory way of eating is actually also very balancing on our fat profile. It's really good. So it's a weight loss in a sense, or weight balancing way of eating. So I might say to them, right, let's bring some nuts and seeds in. What can you get? Could you just buy a bag of mixed nuts?
Right.
Okay. So because individual nuts in the UK anyway, it's scandalous. Nuts and seeds are outrageously priced. They're really expensive. I don't know who's making the money here. You pop into Europe and you buy some bag of walnuts, say, and they are really great value. I mean, it's just, a little bit of my bugbear.
I guess we don't grow nuts here, do we?
Not particularly. There are seeds grown here, flaxseed, which is sometimes called linseed. It can be grown here. There are quite a number of seeds that can be grown here. Hemp seeds, very much grown in the UK. It would be fantastic if that was grown more here. They're so nutritious, flax and hemp seeds, massively nutritious. So
nuts.
Yeah, nuts and seeds.
Nuts
So what they can afford, but because seeds are cheaper in the UK, and that's fine. So we bring that in. We might just bring that in. Maybe you could bring in an extra vegetable into your evening meal. Could you do that?
Any particular vegetables that?
Preferably one that's green in colour.
Okay.
It can be frozen. Doesn't have to be fresh. It can be frozen. Frozen veg is really nutritious. It's great. It's fine. It's snap frozen when it's in
peak.
Season.
Yeah.
At its peak. Absolutely. So a bag of frozen broccoli or a bag of mixed veg. Why not? You know, pop it in to a pan and cook it, or even in a microwave. Bring it out. It's in a bowl. It's boring as anything, isn't it? Like literally some veg that you might have steamed or you might have cooked in the microwave. Very boring. But how about drizzling some olive oil over it, some salt and pepper? Maybe you get some dried herbs, maybe some oregano or like a Mediterranean dried herb, and you just scatter it over the top. Toss that together, and then those veggies taste great. Done. Okay.
So it's almost like you can still have a diet that's pretty, like you can have foods that you're familiar with or that you appreciate eating, but they just become more nutritious adding to them.
Just add in a bit more.
Yeah.
And, you know, if someone maybe had a can of lentils, they could, because canned lentils are already pre-cooked,
Yeah.
they could drain them, they could get a small handful sort of for themselves and they could toss that into those veggies. I mean, this is very doable. And canned lentils are the most they're the gentlest on your gut of all the legumes, pulses, beans. So when someone's first transitioning over to more of this Mediterranean style diet, they want to go softly. You can't hit your gut with a lot of fiber-rich foods and polyphenol-rich foods that is not used to it. It's going to go holy, and you're going to get bloating and either loose bowel movements, or it's just going to really be, people are actually not going to feel so good. So you do nudge it in. But remember, if you've nudged these in, hang on, you've only got a certain amount of room on your plate or in your bowl. What's going out then? Okay, because you have to have a little bit of something going out if more is coming in, and that's good. Without even trying, maybe perhaps it's pasta or rice. They're not having quite as much pasta or white
or
rice.
Just not going for that second helping.
Yeah,
or, you know,
and they're bringing that's right. Yeah,
that's great.
It's easy. It's good. It really just elevates up a Western style diet immediately into a bit of a positive territory.
And it doesn't sound like it has to be too expensive.
No.
Or
really
with
important.
ingredients that people don't have access to. And, you know, like you said, frozen, nothing wrong with frozen. Canned can be fine.
Yeah, frozen's better, but canned,
frozen's better. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, yes, then there's layers, of course, in health. And the meal we shared last night, I mean, great. I love every meal that you make. A Mediterranean style meal. There were just lots of veggies in different ways with lots of herbs and spices because they're high in polyphenols as well. And adding in flavour, we had capers, didn't we? We had some anchovies, we had olives.
You always make it's very fun combinations. Like these, what were the beans, the broad beans?
So they were actually the big butter beans, the giant ones. Yeah. Sometimes they're called gigantes, the really big ones. And
with
I love
capers and herbs and
fresh garlic, olive oil, salt and pepper. Yeah. I mean, that's actually all that was in the big beans, and they were delicious, weren't they? Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of all the beans you make.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And I've now completely got used to it. If I ate the way I do now, which is a Mediterranean style diet, if I did that back when I was first doing my nutrition degree.
Like without a transition.
Yeah. Gosh, my gut would have gone,
So
and actually, I would have got a gut ache, and it would have been painful.
Okay,
yeah.
So slow transition is the key. Obviously, you don't want to shock your system, even if it's shock it into health. That's not the good approach.
Absolutely not. And yes, it means that things will get nudged out. Let's come back to the breakfast. Well, when we call it breakfast, I call it actually first meal of the day because it doesn't matter when you eat it. I just want a person to try and really nourish themselves in that first meal. They usually have more time with that first meal, or they've thought it through a bit. And often people then, they might go out and they just become so busy and they can't kind of think about being too...
Then you just grab something on the go or something that's easy or whatever.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but the first one, start with that. And for me, actually, I do like sourdough is good. It's better if it's whole grain, wholemeal-y, definitely. And then you can add something on top of it, like you could spread it with some nut butter, or you could spread it, have just a really quality cheese on top of that, and maybe some sauerkraut or something.
Or just add something to it, maybe a side of fruit or...
Yeah, a side of kraut, but you do want a bit of protein in there. And so the nut butter's got protein in, the good quality cheese might have protein in it, or you can definitely cook up some eggs. If you eat eggs, have that. That's great. Something like that. That's all really good. I made a labneh last night, which is just simply strained yogurt, and that you can actually spread on a bit of sourdough toast. And I usually put
strained yogurt. It's like thick.
It's thick and it's spreadable. It's like a cream cheese, but it's healthier because it's got live beneficial bacteria in it. And so you can put some herbs in that, or even some garlic. That could be your first meal of the day. But you could also do yogurt or kefir, both brilliant dairy foods. You could add nuts and seeds in any types, ways you like. maybe some whole rolled oats, or maybe another type of whole grain. And yes, sure, do put some sort of a seasonally fresh fruit in if you can, or frozen berries or something. You know, maybe you grate an apple in, or you have some frozen berries and put that in. I mean, they're all good, nourishing
So just
starts.
adding things and having a few different things on your plate.
But that's got us onto fermented foods, which you haven't talked about.
Yeah.
And that's my pet favourite.
That's yes, and I know you make fermented things.
I do.
So, well, first, in terms of, okay, so if we just, the base, gut health, right?
Yeah.
So as somebody, let's say, who has no clue, when I think gut health, I think, oh, probiotics, which, you know, I guess is like what most people think of. Probiotics, yogurt, right? Yeah. But gut health, or it's not just about probiotic foods.
No, right.
Yeah.
So there's probiotic foods and there's prebiotic foods.
What's the difference?
Okay, yeah. So probiotic foods have live organisms in it, which have as in a beneficial effect on us human beings. Really great. So that's things like yogurt or yogurt.
Yes, yogurt. Wait, how do you say it?
I say yogurt.
I say yogurt too.
And you,
I say... What do you say?
Yogurt.
Yogurt.
And you say yogurt.
What do you say?
Yogurt.
I don't hear the difference. What do you say?
Yeah. So yogurt.
Yogurt is, I think, more British, isn't it?
Yogurt?
Yogurt. And you say yogurt.
I say yogurt. I don't know what's going on lately, like Venus isn't Saturn or whatever, but I am struggling with my accent. People are struggling. Anyways.
Okay.
Yeah, okay,
no,
great.
it's fine. You can pronounce it any way you like.
So
Same
yogurt.
Thing. Yeah. And then there's dairy kefir, which is another just simply dairy milk that's been fermented. It actually has more beneficial probiotic microorganisms in it, so it's actually better for you, but you know, they're both good. Then you've got
it's a bit of an acquired taste though, right? It's like super yogurty.
Well, we might taste some later, so let's see.
Your own, right? That you
I make it myself, but
cool,
I'll show you also a great brand you can buy, so we'll have a look at both.
Yes, because we have Yo Valley Organics. They actually send us some products,
so yeah. Perfect. You see, that's really good quality kefir. So great. Okay. So that's good. That's anti-inflammatory. All fermented foods are anti-inflammatory in the body. Like that is literally even been proven in science.
So yogurt is fermented.
Yeah. It's a fermented milk.
That's cool.
It's fermented food.
It's just they're words that are not usually associated.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah. I know. Okay. So you've got yogurt and dairy kefir. I say dairy kefir because it's water kefir, and I'll show you later.
Ooh, okay.
And then you've got fermented vegetables like sauerkraut and kimchi. They're both fermented from cabbage traditionally. Love, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And then you've got things like fermented soybeans, very typical in Japan, for example.
Oh, like natto?
Natto.
I love natto.
Natto is awesome, isn't it? But you've also got, like, say, soy sauce or miso, and that's all fermented soy. Okay. And then you have some fermented drinks. You've got, like, kombucha, which is fermented tea. Yeah. And
which, like, became such a thing.
It is such a thing.
Yeah, well, it is. Yeah. It still is. But, you know, I don't remember kombucha being a thing, like, early 2000s.
No, not at all. There were, weirdly, I did a kombucha class in Sydney in 2000. And it was this real niche sort of event, and I learned how to make kombucha, and we were all thought of as being like real weird
hippies. And now everybody can't get enough of kombucha.
Exactly. Yeah. I know, right? I know, it's so funny. So that's great.
Okay, so fermented foods, a lot of things.
And fermented drinks, all really good, all really anti-inflammatory. If you buy it, you have to know it's not been pasteurized, that it still has the live beneficial microorganisms in it. So if it says pasteurized, no.
Forget about it.
About it.
It defeats the purpose.
Absolutely correct.
Because pasteurization, we covered that in another podcast, but it's when it's basically kind of cooked and killed.
Yeah, that's right. So let's go back to sourdough. Sourdough is actually very good for us because of the fermentation process with the wheat, usually wheat. And that actually helps to pre-convert the wheat into a more nutritious form and more easily digestible in our gut. So it's actually good. But in fact, the actual beneficial microorganisms are almost entirely killed off by the baking. That's fine. It's still a really good product to eat. That's great. Let's go back to these live fermented foods though.
Yeah.
So you need to, if you're buying, say, a kombucha
The like
drink,
fizzy,
Yes.
bubbly, very alive stuff.
Yeah, very alive. That's good. If you are buying a live kombucha drink, it needs to, of course, be stored in the fridge.
Yeah.
Because it's live, and if it's not in the fridge, if it was live, it would pop and burst, and people selling them wouldn't like it. But you also need to be really aware that it is not only live, but it also doesn't have too much sugar in it. So if you made it at home, you would ferment it until it's only faintly sweet. So you've just got to be careful, because if it's too sweet, it defeats the object, because sugar is inflammatory in the body, and so you're drinking this anti-inflammatory drink, and
Does the type of sugar matter?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No.
Oh, so I mean,
So just low in sugar, that's
but
all.
if you put, I mean, for example, like is swapping for honey or maple syrup, is that still?
Yeah, no, it's
it's still sugar.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's still sugar. I mean, maple syrup I quite like. For people who have irritable bowel syndrome, maple syrup is less irritable. But that's something else. It's all sugar. So have a look on the packet and have a look that it's got 5 grams of sugar per 100 mils or per 100 grams.
Or less.
Or less.
Okay.
That's all you have to look out for.
Okay.
And don't have artificial sweeteners, because they actually also disrupt the gut microbiome. So
aspartame.
Yeah, sucralose, any artificial, artificial sweetener. Yeah. So a bit of sugar's fine. It's absolutely fine. So those are fermented foods.
Okay.
Now, they're really anti-inflammatory. Now we need to talk about prebiotics. So those have all got probiotic.
So we covered the probiotics.
We haven't talked about prebiotic.
What's prebiotic?
Prebiotic is the food for your beneficial gut microbiome. Okay, so prebiotic means it's the food, so fibers and polyphenols. Okay, and it's great having all this probiotic food, but you've also got to have the food for your gut microbes to be feeding off. So that's all that lovely Mediterranean diet type foods I was talking about. In those fermented foods, there is a bit of prebiotic foods. For instance, in sauerkraut, there's a bit of cabbage. So sure, that actually has great fibre in it. In milk, for instance, there's actually a prebiotic. It's a little bit prebiotic. Your gut microbes quite like dairy. I mean, not everybody's, but most people's, and that's good. That's a good thing. But what we need to do is nourish that gut microbiome by providing it with these probiotic fermented foods and drinks, and nourish it with these prebiotic, fiber-rich and polyphenol-rich foods. Done.
When somebody starts to transition towards healing their gut a little bit, what would be, I assume it's not a night and day sort of what would they
go
expect?
so slowly, so slowly. Okay, otherwise you get gut bloating and you think this is actually worse than
this is really affecting me.
So go slowly. The best one, I think, if they eat dairy and maybe they eat a little bit of yogurt already, go from yogurt to kefir. Okay, it is in the UK anyway. Kefir is a bit more expensive than yogurt. There is no reason for that, by the way. I think it's just perhaps manufacturers, marketers. But do that. Also, you can get kefir grains online. I'll show you later, actually, and that's actually really great value. You get some great milk and you make it yourself.
It's great. I'm excited. Stay tuned, because we're actually doing a proper recipe episode. Yeah, it's gonna be a first one for Sam and I.
Good, great. Or you could get a little bit of live kimchi or sauerkraut and just have a tablespoon just mixed into a meal.
Okay.
Maybe in the evening,
in your
vegetable.
salad.
Yeah,
or mixed
salad
in your pasta or soup or whatever.
But just don't cook it, because
Don't
then
cook
you
it,
kill the beneficial microorganisms. Yeah, so one or the other. I wouldn't do too much at once. Or you might start with a drink, a kombucha drink, and just have that. I forgot to mention this live apple cider vinegar as well, which also has.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, so it's not the same though, right? Live apple cider vinegar, because you can get. Is there a difference? Regular apple cider.
So regular apple cider vinegar could be pasteurized. So look on the bottle for it might say live or contains the mother.
Yeah, with the mother.
With the mother, or
I never
live.
knew what that meant.
Yeah. The mother means literally the microorganisms that sort of start the fermentation.
So that sediment that you see at the end. That's good stuff.
Yeah, that's very good. Yeah.
That
sediment is good.
Alive. Okay, that's the great.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can just add that in your salad, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Or you can even, I make a great drink called a switchel. and it's delicious. I can make it for you later if you want. Well, you're just using
I think
like
I
a
saw
shot.
that on your website, actually.
Yeah, that's right. You just use a shot of apple cider vinegar, a little bit of sweetness, like say honey or maple syrup maybe, or something like that, and you use like some sparkling mineral water, say, and a little bit of lemon or lime juice. It's delicious, yeah.
Okay, so it's like the ginger shot of the gut.
Yeah, and you could also
basically.
grate fresh ginger into
Okay,
the switch
so like
shot.
double whammy.
Yeah, and ginger is a prebiotic food. Yeah.
So this is good for basically anyone with a gut.
Absolutely.
But if we go back, I guess, to your niche, which is diets for women, and that is aligned to I guess the hormonal cycle. I was just very curious to see, like, to understand, like, what could we expect that a diet that's aligned to a hormone cycle look like, that would be a little bit different, maybe something that how you're used to eating in your 20s, what would that change when you're in perimenopause or in menopause?
Okay.
I know that it's like very individual, but
Yeah.
could you give us a bit of an idea just
Well,
to
it would be
compare?
very similar. It would be
Yeah.
a Mediterranean style diet focused on fermented foods, prebiotics, and just all those foods that we've talked about already. In the perimenopause, menopause, I encourage people to try and eat a little bit more phytoestrogen-rich food, whether they're on HRT or not. It still has benefit, and I also get them to focus a little bit more on calcium and magnesium-rich foods, but definitely ones full of phytoestrogens, which are natural plant estrogens.
You'll find
in
more.
food.
Yeah.
And they're in nuts and seeds. Okay, they're in, for instance, legumes, pulses, beans, especially say soybeans, and there's some in chickpeas. And in nuts and seeds, great ones are things like flaxseed, which is sometimes called linseed, and chia seed, and also sesame seeds and things like that. And so I get them to focus a little bit more on eating those nuts and seeds, some more tofu, maybe drinking some soy milk and that sort of thing, and perhaps adding a bit of chickpeas into their meals and things like that, or maybe eating hummus. And so I focus a bit more on that, along with this very anti-inflammatory way of eating.
It seems like the nice universal.
Oh my gosh, yes, absolutely.
Can diet go as granular as, let's say, because, you know, considering a woman's cycle changes throughout the month, let's say not in perimenopause, but can diet be as granular as adjusting your meals depending on the week or the part you're in?
Yes, very much. And also the timing of your meals, like fasting and not fasting, is really important in your monthly cycle. Sometimes to be not fasting is not a good idea. So I can talk about that now, actually.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So fasting is usually where you have quite a biggish long gap between eating, say, your evening meal and your first meal of the day.
Right.
And fasting. Now, typically, for every human being, it's quite healthy, unless there's some specific
need,
illness or that someone needs to eat very regularly. I mean, you would always follow what your physician says. But for most people, it's great to have a break from eating, i.e. digesting, for about 12 hours overnight. Now, a lot of people don't do that because they snack late into the night, and they might, because they want to have a quick breakfast before they go out to work, say, they might not. They might sort of finish snacking in 9 or even 10 in the evening, and they're having their breakfast at 7 in the morning. That's not 12 hours. So it's really healthy for everyone to have a 12-hour gap from digesting and eating overnight. Right, that's fasting. Overnight, 12 hours.
So most people fast without even realizing.
Yeah,
basically.
they do, hopefully. Not most people. You'd
Okay.
be surprised how many people kind of nibble late into the night.
It's true. I sometimes wake up for a little midnight snack. But yeah.
Okay, so it just depends. So then if you're fasting for a bit longer, say 14 hours, that's a little bit healthier on your digestive tract to give it even more of a longer rest. So maybe you finish your evening meal at 7 p.m, I don't know, something like that. And then you would start eating, say, at 9 a.m. That's 14 hours.
Okay.
That's better. Longer can sometimes be even better, but that's very individual on the person, on what they're hoping to achieve. That's a great rest for your gut microbiome and you, a human, your digestion. It's really good. Now, a long fast, say a 16-hour fast, is not good in that premenstrual time.
Okay.
So that time running, that's maybe 7 to 10 days running up to your period. It's not so good to do that fasting. Definitely the 12 hours overnight, but the long fasting, or even some people occasionally fast all day, and that's quite healthy at other times, depending on that person. I mean, obviously, if it's counter to what they might have some illness, that
or what they're
said
recommended.
And so not to do that. So that's the timing of your meals, and then during your menstrual cycle. For instance, running up to your period, that 7 to 10 days, it's good actually to have a little bit more carbs. Okay. You know how a woman often craves carbs in that time?
Yeah. Like, is it just some sort of...
no, it's good actually to have more nurturing comfort food. It's actually better for our system. So go with it. I would rather those carbs, of course, are complex carbs.
Yeah. Comfort food can be like healthy comfort food.
Yeah,
We're
it
not
can
talking
be
about
seriously
running to
healthy.
McDonald's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we say that? We have to beep that. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you take that out because we're slagging off a company that actually has just done something quite beneficial potentially. Yeah.
You don't want to run and like eat a whole bunch of junk food, but like comfort food can be healthy.
Comfort food can be seriously healthy. And you know, and women don't sometimes, it's not everybody, don't sometimes have as much energy in that time running up to that week running up to the period. So that's not a time to go doing loads of cooking because you probably don't have lots of energy. So when you do have more energy earlier in your menstrual cycle, then make those healthy comfort foods and bung them in your freezer and then pull them out. It's really good. So other times, not so much. There was quite a bit of talk about seed cycling, eating different seeds during different times in your menstrual cycle.
That feels a bit trendy, though.
Unfortunately, it's trendy and not backed by science. It doesn't make a difference. Eating seeds during your whole menstrual cycle,
great. Yes.
Amazing for your hormone kind of sort of, waves, I like to call them, rather than balance. And it's very good. So those are little tips. For instance, there was some research that said if you eat too much red meat in that week running up to your menstrual cycle, as in your period, you'd get more period pain. So you cut back on red meat.
True?
Yeah, no, it's a research.
Really?
It's research, but it wasn't like lots of research. It was a few proper research, but showed that those women that were eating lots of red meat running up to their period had more period pain, and those that didn't had less. But that comes back to that Mediterranean diet, you see, which is so healthy for human beings
and just super
is
diverse.
Really low on red meat, and it's very infrequent eating it. So
okay. Interesting. I mean, look, I have my particular diet, and obviously I think it's just very important to see it through different lenses, trying different things. You figure out what works for you too. What's sustainable, what's applicable, and then just what makes you feel good. I think just the practice of exercising attunement to how you feel is maybe something we also don't do enough of. So
completely. I mean, this is my area of focus, but gosh, we can go into the fact that the Mediterranean diet is such a sustainable one because it's very plant focused. Well, I think that is most likely to be more sustainable. But also the Mediterranean diet, when they look at how healthy it is in research, it's not just about what people eat. It's also maybe they sit down to eat and they prepare their own foods, okay? It's also the fact that often they're eating with someone else or in a community. It's also the fact that in the Mediterranean, people share community more. They're getting together more as well. So that's more healthy. And actually, when we get together with people and touch them, we're sharing microbes.
More connected. Oh, whoa.
No, it's good. It's a very good thing. It's very good.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so that's a good thing as well. And maybe I'm preparing you a meal, and I'm actually sharing a few microbes of mine in that meal, and that's okay. It's all right. And then you're eating it, and so it's okay. It's not creepy and oh gosh, is that going to cause me to? Yeah.
No, but it's so true. Okay. I mean, because I was thinking from just like this spiritual energy.
Yes, that as well.
You can have the best, healthiest meal, but eating it alone, it's a little bit sad. And we do get our batteries kind of revved up by being around people we like and having a great conversation. But sharing microbes.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, I mean, sure, there'll be plenty of people in the Mediterranean who eat on their own, but they do get together much more frequently than, certainly in my culture, because I grew up in the UK, the culture of getting together quite often with family, really close family and friends, was actually not there.
Only
that
on
much.
Sundays. With a roast.
And so
or like meals go on much longer, let's say, in other cultures, which then your meal gets spread out over time. You're just picking a little bit. You're not having this like eating super fast huge meal, and then that's just sitting there. You get to like spread it out, enjoy over time.
Absolutely right.
There's a lot of different, it's cool that you say that, because there is a lot of different layers that are about the lifestyle around your diet that plays with diet.
Yeah, exactly.
So you said, well, a few tips. I actually have a few questions for you, like kind of quick fire, if you want to go through them. So, okay, so just like very, very quick in general, super easy, maybe more of a Band-Aid situation, but if there's any one thing that people should, well, I had said eliminate. I see that that's maybe not the best approach now, but let's say if there's any one food that people should consider reconsidering today that's common in diets, what would it be?
Sugar.
Yeah. All sugars, processed sugars.
So all sugar is just a little bit is okay. A lot is definitely not okay.
Okay.
Yeah. It's very inflammatory, a lot of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's usually found in like the processed foods you were talking about anyways. So if you were cutting out sugar, then you're probably cutting out.
Yeah, probably cutting out bought cakes and biscuits, bought pies. Probably cutting out those bought yogurts that are really, or yogurts that are really high in sugar. Yeah. A lot of yogurt is really good for us that we buy, but the ones that are really high in sugar, no.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is one of the most underrated foods that you think people are missing out on?
Oh my gosh, you threw that at me and I hadn't prepared that. Oh,
you can only pick just one. No, I'm kidding. You can pick a few. Well, nuts.
Definitely nuts and seeds.
Yeah, nuts and seeds.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I think that's quite fundamental, and we're really missing out on those. Yeah. And also a fermented food. Just a fermented food, that can be one of the ones I've listed. Yeah. It doesn't have to be all of them. Just getting back into having a fermented food each day. And that could be a yogurt, but you need to know that it's a quality yogurt that's live and not the really high sugary ones that are being pasteurized. So just a quality natural plain yogurt.
Natural yogurt, so, maybe naturally sweeten it with a little bit of fruit. Or just
so you sweeten it up yourself. Absolutely. You sweeten it up yourself with a little bit of sort of mashed up fruit or something, and maybe some cinnamon. In fact, I can show you that later as well.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and then as well, I know also like you travel a lot as well, and I'm sure you travel and you help look at people's different pantries and fridges, right, for their diets. Yeah. You're like the Mary Kondo of the pantry. Yeah. What would be let's say like a few staples that you recommend people always having on hand that could help, that they could add into their diets that aren't just good to have?
I actually think adding in natural, healthy flavors, because so it's very easy to get veggies. We talked about you could even buy a bag of frozen mixed veggies, fine. But adding in then the stuff that makes us humans enjoy our food, so taste good, but actually I know are great for your gut microbes as well. So they stimulate your digestion as well. I think that's really good. So I would say things like anchovies, capers, olives, herbs and spices, and they do not
herbs
have
don't
to
have to be fresh.
No, they don't. You see, you get yourself some dried herbs, a few dried spices, sweet or savory. Really, really good for us humans, but also great for our gut microbiome.
Is spicy good?
Like yeah.
Spicy is good too.
Spicy is good, but remember when I'm talking about spicy, I'm not just talking about chili and hot cayennes. I'm talking about cumin and coriander and fennel and fenugreek and cinnamon and cloves and nutmeg, and I'm just talking about all spices here. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So next question. Apart from food, let's say, or your diet, or what is the second most important thing that you think is affecting people's general well-being in their lifestyle?
Lack of exercise.
Any
Exercise. Any exercise is good. Yeah.
So like moving.
We're just way too
walking.
sedentary still.
Yeah.
We all know it. Everyone knows it in the countries that I, know of.
Mm-hmm.
They just know that they need to move more. Any movement
Any
is good.
movement.
Any
Even
movement.
taking a stretch.
Oh my gosh, anything.
Yeah, we don't do that enough.
Anything's good. Yeah. Lack of exercise. I mean, I could have said, I would have sleep.
Yeah,
getting your
sleep comes up a
but
lot,
actually
yeah.
exercise helps you sleep, and eating well helps you sleep. So
Everything kind of really
I think
works
it's
together.
It's exercise, movement, any movement.
Any movement.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna move after this.
Movement helps your gut microbiome
As well. Okay, so
It helps peristalsis, which is the movement of your food through your gut. Like your gut microbes like us doing exercise. So yeah,
it's so funny. It's like it's always harder to take care of yourself, but it's almost easier to take care of others. So maybe this is just a psychological trick. If you can't take care of yourself, do it for your microbes that you're
your
hosting.
microbiome. Is it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
microbiome.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so and having worked with obviously clients from all walks of life across different cultures and countries, and obviously we know that there's been a lot of misconceptions, or just science constantly evolves. So what do you think today is one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to food or like a healthy diet?
Now I'm touching into a little bit of a ground here. I think too much protein. Eating too much protein and using that as what you fill up on. And I think people need to be eating more fibre.
Okay.
Just from wherever, more fibre. All that whole Mediterranean style diet is full of fibre. And actually people maybe are eating a bit too much protein now and not enough fibre. And I want them to pull back a bit on the protein. And, I'm talking about the countries that I know of, the people I know of. I'm not talking about the whole world, because some people are not able to get enough protein in their diet in some countries. But the ones I know about, it's a bit too much protein and not enough fibre.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, I'll think about that one.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then, on the sort of trends and fads, and obviously like science being something that just constantly evolves. What do you think was one of the most surprising things that you learned, or that one of your own myths that was debunked, or what is one of the things that, because obviously you've been practicing for a while, and we discover new things every day.
Yeah.
So what do you think is one of your, maybe not most recent, but what was one of the things that was the most surprising that you learned through science that you wouldn't have known as like an average consumer, that kind of
so
turned the light bulb on?
There were quite a number of things.
Yeah.
But actually, I think it was learning about if I can keep my gut healthy, and that includes the microbes living in there. But if I can concentrate on just making my gut better, because remember I used to be bloated.
Yeah.
I used to have loose bowel movements or constipation. If I can eat from my gut, then actually I'm eating for my entire whole body and mind.
Okay.
So if I focus on actually making my gut healthier, actually
You're helping everything else.
Everything. Yeah, very much so. So for me, I wasn't eating enough fibre. I was basically eating a Western style diet that was slightly healthy. So I was having a cereal for breakfast. I thought I was doing the right thing. I was eating Weetabix.
Right.
And I was occasionally having a cookie or something, or sometimes a piece of fruit. I was having a sandwich for lunch, but it was wholemealy. And then I might have pasta for dinner. So but the pasta might have been, I don't even think it was wholemeal back then.
You still eat, like, you made cake for us and all
I
that,
did.
but it's just like a healthier version.
It's
not every day all the time.
Not at all, yeah. Well, it was low in sugar, it was high in fibre.
Yeah.
I used olive oil actually instead of butter in the cake. Yeah. And put a load of spices in the cake, because I know they're full of polyphenols and anti-inflammatory. So yeah, you're right.
You can still have a very fun, delicious diet, even if it's healthy.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so what do you think, let's say, is one of the biggest challenges for people, for your clients that you've seen who struggle in having a healthy diet? What do you think is the biggest hurdle?
It's the time and effort. It's literally that. Because if they are eating a Western style diet, they're feeling tired. They're feeling tired. If they're in perimenopause or early menopause, they're feeling tired. So it's the energy to change.
And that affects your motivation.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Because it's so funny, a lot of people say, oh, it must be cost, because it's so costly to have a healthy diet. But, you've kind of disproven that. Yeah, it's just the motivation.
Well, yeah, and they might even have some motivation, and they think, I know I need to, I've got to do something for myself. I need to, I just feel so shit. Yeah. But then there's the effort to do it. And that's what I like to try and say. We just change a few things, just change a few things.
Slowly.
Oh my God, I want to hug some people that walk virtually into my clinic room and go, oh, bless you. It's not going to be, it's not going to be that hard. This is what you can do.
And you're actually you're not that crazy for feeling so tired. It's not, you're not.
Yeah. You're tired because of this reason, and we can sort this out.
Yeah. There's a little light at the end of the tunnel, incrementally too.
Yeah.
What do you expect to see in terms of upcoming trends or upcoming shifts in people's diets, or just from someone in the industry?
Well, I think that the big food manufacturers might start putting a bit more fiber in foods, just adding it in. Yeah, that's a good move. That's a good move. They might get a little bit more interested in kind of the fermented food scene and try and add that in and bring it in more so it becomes much more mainstream, and that would be good. And I think from my perspective, I think people will grasp this whole thing about feeding your gut microbiome even more as being actually fundamental to being a healthy human being. Because right now I don't know whether they've got it. I think it's still a bit too niche. And so I'm hoping they'll understand a bit more about eating a bit more fibre. And that doesn't mean literally getting a bowl of all bran. I mean, all those Mediterranean foods.
That's
all
probably
of the
very
ones,
bad.
Right. All of those foods all have fibre in them. Yeah. And they just might bring it in a bit more. And that'll just become a bit more mainstream, I hope. Is this a wish, or is this what I see as a trend?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'd like to think that they understand it a bit more. And so do big food manufacturers understand about bringing a bit more fibre in. I mean, I see it a little bit. Some yogurt companies say they've added inulin. Inulin is a fibre, good for your gut microbes. Not everybody. Some people get a bit of bloating from inulin, but most people are okay with inulin. And so some products have added in inulin. Well, that's a good move. I mean, I know in a purist sort of world, we want actually just all the natural fibres in food, but inulin isn't totally natural. It's a fibre, and they've added it in. That's a good move.
Interesting. Okay. So any last piece of advice or wisdom for, people or women at home, let's say, who just want to be a little bit more of an advocate for themselves when it comes to their health and how they're feeling. So I really know women much better, and I know they do not put themselves first. Oh gosh, they don't. They put just other people first. In whatever situation is, they're not usually putting themselves first, and I want them to think about themselves and trying to make themselves feel better first, and then sure they can help everybody else. Yeah, and probably even better.
Yeah, oh, exactly. Yeah, because they'll have more energy and it'd be more into life, and that will be great. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's actually a really great takeaway. I did not expect that.
Okay.
But I think it's a very good message, especially to our women audience. Okay, so we can, so anyone who's interested about your work, obviously can find you on your website, which will pop up obviously on screen. You have an amazing Instagram, and you share tips and recipes. I mean, I'm always watching and doing a few things, taking notes. Anything you want to share that's coming up for you?
Not especially, because my fermented food classes, for instance, which is sometimes actually in person, in the UK mostly only, and then sometimes online, they'll just be on my website, and then just my workshops if they're coming, or talks. I give talks sometimes a bit, and it'll all be on my website. But yes, I do share quite a lot of free information. I'm really happy to. recipes and information on my social media, but also on my website.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us. I feel like
Pleasure.
I'm so much more educated on my own health cycle, but also like the gut health. And I think it's
good.
quite nice to just remember we're taking care of a lot of other things than just us. Although we should always put ourselves first, of course, if we want to help others.
I mean, actually, it's the same for guys. Apparently, a modern guy these days does not put himself first enough and doesn't actually think about him and his health enough, and anyone in between. I mean, just that kind of, when I say modern, I only can really reflect on the countries I've lived in and know those sort of people. But we're coming into something else again.
No, it's super interesting. I mean, look, we have our resident therapist who's spoken to us also about, you know, the benefits of men's workshop. And I think
absolutely,
I think everyone's a little bit underserved somewhere. And it's that kind of like airplane scenario of like you gotta put the mask on yourself to help the person next to you. And I think the coming back to the mission of this whole, you know, of a new table, where if you can make yourself a little bit better as an individual, then likely you'll be able to do a little bit better for the people around you, your communities, your environment. So yeah, this is all super good stuff.
Completely. Brilliant.
I am very hungry. We're off to film our very first cooking show. So yeah, let's head to the kitchen. And well, thank you so much for this chat.
Okay, pleasure.
It was super interesting.
Okay,
great. Ready?